And so, hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Annie Gaines, and I am the Continuing Education Consultant here at the Idaho Commission for Libraries. And on behalf of the ICFL and the Institute of Museum and Library Services, one of our funding partners, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar, Looking for Mirrors in the Library, Collection Development to Support Indigenous Patrons. Before we get started, I have a couple housekeeping things. So everyone was muted as they came into the webinar space, but we encourage you to use the chat feature to ask questions and talk with your other fellow attendees. You'll receive an email about a week after this with a link to the recording of this webinar, and the recording will also live on our website and on our YouTube channel. And also, you'll be prompted to complete an evaluation at the end of this webinar session, and we always appreciate your honest feedback. So to get us started, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Christina Taylor, Youth Services Program Coordinator at the ICFL. Take it away, Christina.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Christina Taylor. I'm the Youth Services Project Coordinator here at the Commission for Libraries, and I'm very excited for this webinar today. We have a lot of great information to share with you today and in not a great amount of time, so I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to do a couple of quick introductions of our presenters, and then we'll get started. So I'm going to read from my notes here because I want to get it accurate. So in order of presentation, today we're going to hear first from Johanna Jones. Johanna is an engaged citizen of the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma. She oversees the Office of Indian Education at the Idaho State Department of Education. The benchmarks of her work are to build collaborative partnerships with the tribes in Idaho, post-secondary institutions, and education stakeholders to advance Indian education and increase awareness, support, and services for tribal communities. Next, we'll hear from Sunshine Shepherd. I was afraid I was going to mess up all those SH sounds, but I got it. Sunshine is the director of the Pre-Freshman Engineering Program, also known as PrEP, at American Indian Services. She is a member of the Idaho STEM Action Center's STEM ecosystem and is an enrolled member of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes. After Sunshine, we'll hear from Mandi Harris. Mandi is the Youth Services Supervisor for the Coeur d'Alene Public Library. She is an active member of the American Indian Library Association and is an enrolled citizen of the Cherokee Nation. And throughout the webinar and during the Q&A session, we'll hear from Jessica James. Jessica has an MA and is the Tribal Youth Education Program Manager for the Shoshone-Bannock tribes and is an enrolled member of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes. She is also affiliated with the Pyramid Lake Paiute and Washoe tribes of Nevada, California. She is a member of Idaho's STEM Action Center's STEM ecosystem for Region 4, 5, and 6, and is a member of the Idaho Indian Education Committee. Welcome to all our presenters, and thank you for being here. So we will just go ahead get started, and we're going to turn it over to Johanna, and she's going to give us an overview, pretty brief, even though we could spend a lot more time on it, of Idaho's tribes. So go ahead and take it away, Johanna.
Okay, and are we screen sharing right now?
You should have permission, but we can't see it.
Okay, let me see what's going on. Okay. Can you see it now?
No. So when you press the green share button, that brings up, and then you need to press the, there we go. Perfect.
Okay. Everything's always different. Okay, so I know this is going to be quick and fast. Stop if you have any questions, but I'm trying to get through this in about 15 minutes, and then we can take some questions. So I just want to give you a brief overview about the tribes of Idaho. So first thing we're going to do is draw yourself an abstract map of Idaho and place the traditional and customary boundaries of the tribes there, please. Sorry, I went too fast. Anybody want to tell me what they drew on their map? Because we're going to have two questions. And Christina, are you taking chat? Are you watching that for us?
Yes, I am. Yep.
Okay. Okay, now I want you to place the location of the reservations of Idaho's federally recognized tribes. Okay, we're going to do a self-check and tell me if you got them right. So the first answer, you should have circled the whole map, the whole portion of Idaho, that and other places, Montana, Wyoming, even as far as ways of Oklahoma, were traditional and customary boundaries of our tribes. So if you've been on any, if you stepped your foot on any place in Idaho, you have been on tribal lands. You can see here are our reservations: Kootenai Tribe of Idaho, Coeur d'Alene Tribe, Nez Perce Tribe, the Shoshone-Paiute tribes and Shoshone-Bannock tribes. And you can overlay that and look at all the counties of Idaho. So there's a lot of dual citizenship, dual crossing of our reservations and counties. I want to set the political context of our tribes for you. They are our federally recognized Indian tribes, have inherent rights and a political relationship with the United States. In Idaho, we only have 5 federally recognized tribes. So it's important for you to understand we do not have any state recognized tribes in Idaho. However, throughout the United States, there are some state recognized tribes, but we're only talking about federally recognized tribes right now. This does not derive from a race or an ethnicity. We are a people with a political status. Tribal members are citizens of 3 sovereigns, their tribe, the United States, and the state in which they reside. There is a government-to-government relationship that must be maintained and adhered to, and there's a trust responsibility, mostly at the federal level. There is some at the state level. The historical context, looking at a federal lens, before 1492, you know, we lived freely, we had our own systems, and then with contact, we had a lot of policies made that impacted us negatively, maybe positively at some points, but mostly negatively. From 1492 on to 1800s, we had the colonization period. From 1789 on, we had the treaty period, and what was significant about that is the Indian Removal Act. Going into the assimilation and allotment period, we had the Dawes General Allotment Act, and those 2 acts really were the precept of moving us into reservation lands. Then from 1934 on, we had tribal reorganization period. From 1953 on, termination and relocation. I'm sorry, this is so touching. I keep touching and it keeps moving in and out. I won't touch anything. Termination and relocation, and present day, we do have self-determination. A historical context from the state. From 1890, Idaho became a state. 1924, American Indians were afforded a national citizenship. 1948, Idaho accepted the responsibility for educating our American Indian students. And in 1950, Idaho gave voting rights to our tribal members. Since time immemorial, we have always honored and been good stewards of our Aboriginal and traditional homelands. We have always had some form of governance in our tribal communities, and education has always been a foundation of our tribes. People say science, STEM is new, not to our American Indian people. We have used science, technology, engineering, math since time immemorial in everything we ate, lived, breathed, and produced. Tribal sovereignty is an inherent right that ensures self-government, cultural preservation, and affirms the political identity of Indian nations. They can maintain their own tribal membership roles and identify those criteria in becoming a tribal member. They protect their tribal citizens, land, and resources. When people talk about tribal government or tribes, they think, oh, it's pretty simple, but they operate much like a city or any other kind of government. And these are a few of the things that they oversee outside of just education: public safety, economic development, housing, transportation, natural resources, They do operate, their officials are elected. They operate much like any, again, municipality. Contemporary lens, there's 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States. There's 326 reservations. They are very diverse. While there may be some commonalities among tribes, each tribe is distinct in their own way. There are schools on reservations. They may be a combination of public, private, religious, charter, or BIE schools. They're full-fledged productive communities. There are a lot of business owners and businesses that the tribes own. They are active, engaged members of not only their reservation, but throughout the communities at large. And they provide many services, not only to their tribal members, but to other non-Indians and other tribes. The 5 tribes of Idaho, again, the Coeur d'Alene tribe, the Nez Perce tribe, the Kootenai tribe, the Shoshone-Bannock tribes. Remember, these last 2 are dual tribes, and the Shoshone-Paiute tribes. The Skitshumish, this is their traditional lifestyle. And this is current, they're pulling canoe here and they are harvesting water potatoes. This is their traditional dress, and this is some of their ancestral leaders. Their traditional homelands were in Washington, Idaho, and Montana. Their reservation is Plummer, Idaho, established by executive order in 1873. They have a little over 345,000 acres. And in case you missed it, they are the 2nd largest employer in Northern Idaho. They operate the Merriam Health and Wellness Center for their entire community, which sees tribal members as well as non-tribal members and other tribes. 5% of their gaming revenues support public education through grants and other gifts. And their current chairman is Chief Allen. The Canucksa is the Kootenai tribe of Idaho. You can see here along the Clearwater River is where their traditional homelands, where they set up their home. They are responsible for restoring sturgeon to the waters. They have their own police departments like many other tribes. And here are some of their traditional clothing. They lived in Washington, Idaho, Montana, British Columbia, and Alberta. Their reservation is in Bonners Ferry, established by executive order in 1974, and they have a little over 2,700 acres. In case you missed it, they are the largest employer in Boundary County. They have the Kootenai Tribal Sturgeon Hatchery, the Kootenai River Inn Casino and Spa. Their current chairman is Gary Aiken Jr. And something very significant about the Kootenai tribe is they only started with 10 acres, and that was through a peaceful protest by declaring war in the United States and instilling it wasn't a tax, but it was like a toll to cross their ancestral lands. And it was very small, but that really got the attention, and they started with 10 acres, and then they've really expanded. The Nimipu. This is a traditional longhouse. This is, do you know who this is? You should know who this is. This is their seasonal calendar. And if you don't, this is Chief Joseph and his family. This is their seasonal calendar, and the Nimipu really adhere to this in storytelling and hunting and such. And again, they were very instrumental in restoring salmon to the waters. Their traditional and customary homelands are Washington, Idaho, Oregon, Wyoming, and Montana. Their reservation is in Lapwai, established by the Nez Perce Treaty of 1855, and they have over 770 acres. They are one of the top 3 largest employers in North Central Idaho. They rescued Lewis and Clark. They have their own radio station, and their current chairman is Sharon Wheeler. So those are their top in case you missed it. The next tribe, the Shoshone-Bannock. You will see here some of their traditional homelands and their teepees. They currently are leading the nation in a resurgence of Indian relay races. They have a lot of relay race teams in their tribal community. This is home to one of the largest outdoor powwows in the Northwest. And you can see some of their traditional clothing here. Their customary and traditional homelands were Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, Oregon, Nevada, California, Montana, and Canada. Their reservation is in Fort Hall, established by the Fort Bridger Treaty of 1868, with almost 600,000 acres. In case you missed it, they are the fourth largest employer in Southeast Idaho. Again, they have the Indian relay races, they have a tribal buffalo herd, and their current chairman is Devin Boyer. The Nui and the Nua, they live on the border of Idaho and Nevada, and they are a big ranching and cowboy community, as you can see through these pictures. Their customary and traditional homelands include Nevada, Idaho, California, and Utah. Their reservation is in Owyhee. Their executive order, it was established by executive order in 1877, and they have almost 300,000 acres. In case you missed it, they are the largest single employer in Owyhee. They have trophy trout and bass fishing in 3 reservoirs. Their tribal members are dual citizens of Nevada and Idaho, and their current chairman is Brian Thomas. And when I talk about the customary and traditional homelands, those are the main ones, but they were no boundaries, no reservations. So you freely hunted and gathered and set up your traditional homelands wherever it was necessary. And sometimes it was through their traditional calendars. The economic impact of the 5 tribes combined, you can see and I'm sure this is taken from a few years ago, so it has increased. They add over 14,000 jobs to Idaho's economy, and that is just not their tribal members. They also hire non-tribal members and other tribes. They have over a 1 billion multiplier effect to the economy. They have raised over almost 7 million in the gross state product, which is about 1% of that state gross state. And then they are responsible for more than 50,000 people visiting Idaho a year. So you can imagine the economic impact they have. A lot of people don't realize how much the tribes give and support Idaho. FAQs, what is a reservation? It is not land that was given to us. It is land that was set aside to maintain a lifestyle, and it is not given land. Do Indians get free money? No, I don't know anybody who gets free money. Native American or American Indian, it's best to use the tribal name, but I prefer American Indian, Native Americans to anthropological in term. What is a tribal council? They are elected officials who oversee the betterment of their tribal communities. And a powwow is a traditional gathering, but more contemporary, you see a lot of contest powwowing. And sometimes they have powwows to celebrate milestones in someone's life or at a passing. The best practice, do use the appropriate tribal name, ask respectful questions, and be cognizant of language. You know, I hear people say, hey, let's go have a powwow. Hey, hey, chief, why don't you join me for lunch? So be cognizant of that language. Understand Indians are human just like you, distinguish between the past and present, and acknowledge the diversity among tribes. Do not dress up like an Indian for Halloween or represent traditional clothing as costumes. Mistake myths for reality. Think all Indians are the same. Believe Indians are extinct, or characterize us as savages or animals or anything less than we are. I know that was quick. I promised you it would be quick. So we are in a safe zone. If you have any questions or you want to clarify something, please feel free. We are a safe zone here.
Thank you, Johanna. We also have time for questions at the end as well. So if you don't feel like you want to jump in yet, that's okay too. There is a question in the chat. It says, could you clarify your preferred usage of American Indian versus Native American? I didn't quite catch it.
Oh, I use American Indian because Native American is too anthropological in term. And if you were born in America, you could say, I'm Native American. I was born here in America.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think we'll move on to Sunshine now, and then we can always come back. Oh, hang on. Another question. If I'm referring to a specific tribe or nation, or if I'm not sure what tribe nation someone is a member of, is the term Indigenous also okay? Or is American Indian generally the preferred term?
Indigenous, fine. Yeah, and like I said, best practice, you could say, oh, what's your the name of your tribe, and then use that.
Great. And then one more, what is more appropriate? Shoshone-Bannock Reservation or Fort Hall?
I will defer to Sunshine on that. I am not the one thing I try not to do is speak for the tribes. I will give you information, but I will never speak for the tribes because I am not a tribal member. So Sunshine, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think if you're just talking about the location, the best thing would be to use Shoshone-Bannock Reservation in Fort Hall, Idaho.
Okay, and there's one more question, and I don't know if we want to go into this now, but I'm going to say it and you guys can decide. Question, as a children's librarian, is it okay for me to read aloud or storytell native stories or traditional stories? I read somewhere once that I should have permission first. And I don't know if we want to, Sunshine, you want to talk about that, or if we want to wait till after Mandy's portion?
I can do my spiel and then we'll let Mandi jump on because I think she has some answers in her presentation to a question like that. So, hi everybody. Good afternoon. My name's Sunshine, woman with two lives, shepherd. I'm a Shoshone-Bannock tribal member from Fort Hall, Idaho. I'm excited to be here. It's crazy. The weather took a turn and there's a snowstorm here now. So that's exciting to hear you are all in sunny areas. I'm here just a little bit to talk a little bit about my experience as an educator working with Native American students and a little bit about the prep program that I run. So I'm the director of the American Indian Services Pre-Freshman Engineering Program. You want to look us up if you have undergraduate students that are looking for scholarships. American Indian Services, we offer undergraduate scholarships and also an outreach program where we focus on recruiting students who are in middle school to come to our program in the summer on a university campus. We have 6 campuses in this on 6 different reservations, and the one here is Idaho State University. We serve students from the Shoshone-Bannock Reservation. These students are middle school students, 6th and 7th grade. They come for 3 years to our program, and they actually are just immersed into the hard sciences. So they're able to take courses on campus, classes ranging from logic to engineering, problem solving. And these students come for 6 weeks. They do these classes and they also have career presentations and field trips based around STEM. And like Johanna had mentioned, the nice thing is that we're able to relate STEM and the teachings that we're doing in STEM to their culture and to the traditional teachings and things that they've always grown up knowing and doing, but never had the name STEM for it. So realizing that their cultural celebrations, their cultural ceremonies, their cultural teachings that they already do all through the summer is already the things that we're teaching them in STEM. So one of the things that I think is really important in cultural representation in literature, especially in STEM, is that we make sure to bring those to light to the students, because a lot of times we struggle with seeing that the students who come onto the campus already kind of have a culture shock coming onto the campus where there aren't very many Native American students, but also not seeing themselves in these positions and not seeing themselves as engineers or future chemists, you know, and we know that they can do these things. So I think that that's really the important thing, is that we make sure to use Native American speakers and presenters the best that we can. So these students are seeing themselves in those positions and in those spaces and places and knowing that they're safe there and they're comfortable and that those are where they belong as well. In our group here, we talked a little bit about children's books, which Mandy's going to talk about. So I just had a little bit story, personal story. I also am a mother of 2 boys. So one's 6 and one is 3, Storm and Troy. And Troy just started kindergarten. It's been really weird because COVID. So he thinks that wearing masks and living in a plexiglass is normal. So I'm glad that there wasn't a shock there for him. But he's had to deal a lot with boys calling him a girl. He has really long hair and he loves his hair. You know, we've talked about the importance of having long hair, and his, you know, all of his family has grown up with long hair. And so I brought that to the attention of the teacher. And luckily for me, she was really open-minded. And I was able to find some literature and children's books to bring to her class that she's able to put up, show to the kids, and read those stories to the students. And I feel like that was really on her part, shows what teacher she is, you know, like what she's there for the students, and she's willing to be open-minded and share those different teachings that students may not have ever been exposed to. And a lot of times that's what I tell my son is we can't be mad and upset that these students are doing this. We have to help educate, because otherwise there would be no, you know, they wouldn't, they don't know. And so unless we bring those books to them or bring these things to light, then there's not really any way that you can be upset about something if you're not willing to teach about it too. So I just think that it's really important that these kind of webinars and conversations are had. And I would commend all of you that are here participating today for having an open mind and being willing to have this conversation and come out and ask questions, and also look through your libraries and find things that are culturally appropriate and making sure that they're representing the students the best that they can. So I think I took my time up. Thank you guys for being here and letting me be a part of this today.
All right, I think it's up. All right, I'm getting the thumbs up from Christina. Thank you so much, Johanna, and thank you, Sunshine. We are going to head into the portion of the webinar now where I'm going to talk about collection development, taking a look at Indigenous representation in your library, and then also how you can incorporate Indigenous children's books into your programming. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right, so, oh, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Annie, for the thumbs up that it went through. That's always the, there we go. All right, so indigenizing your collection. And the first thing I wanted to show is actually a tweet that I just saw yesterday that I thought was really fun and made me excited. It's not related to children's books at all, but Blanche on the Golden Girls was Native, and it has been confirmed by Dr. Twyla Baker that Blanche was Choctaw, and her sister actually, Dr. Melinda McClanahan. So both Sunshine and Johanna have talked about STEM and the Indigenous connections with STEM. So Dr. Melinda McClanahan, Rue McClanahan's sister, was on the board of ACES, which is the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. I just thought that was fantastic. So not only do we have a Golden Girl, we have the head of the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. I thought that was pretty awesome. I just saw that yesterday, which leads me into my discussion of there's been a lot of talk about the dangers of a single story, right? We've seen that TED Talk about the dangers of a single story. So I just wanted to present with you some contemporary Indigenous American Indian figures that you should know. So we have Jennifer Harper, the founder of Cheekbone Beauty. We have Robin Wall Kimmerer, who's Potawatomi, and she's not only a professor of environmental and forest biology, she's a poet and writer. And if you haven't read her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, I highly recommend it. The Secretary of the Interior. And then I threw on here a friend of mine, Stephen Chaney. He's a former firefighter, and he's founded his own handcrafted wood company using reclaimed wood. And then there's a show that's about to premiere called Rutherford Falls. And the creator of that show, Sierra Teller, she's Navajo, and she's been a screenwriter and a showrunner for shows like Superstore and Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And Rutherford Falls is premiering just in a couple of days, and it features a wide cast of Native American characters and Native American actors, and the Jana Schmeiding, who stars in it. We have the copy. I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. It's Everything You Wanted to Know About Indians But Were Afraid to Ask by Anton Troyer. She beaded the copy of the Young Readers edition. So not only is she an actress, but her beadwork art made the cover of this book, which I just thought was a really cool children's connection. So be sure to check out that show and see some fantastic contemporary representations of American Indians and Native Americans on television. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, before we get into some more things, about what does your nonfiction section look like? And these are a few books that have come out this spring, and then also that have come out over the past. So if you wanted to do a little more research yourself and educate yourself as an adult, I almost said as a grown-up. I'm a children's librarian, so I always, as a grown-up, if you want to, I highly recommend An Indigenous People's History of the United States by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. And then just last year, Debbie Reese, who you might be familiar with from the website American Indians in Children's Literature, she and Jean Mendoza adapted it and made the Young Readers edition. So An Indigenous People's History of the United States for young people. So I brought that into my children's collection. We have the grown-up version, and then we also have the children's version. And so this would be great if you wanted to not only educate yourself, but bring in this young readers edition. It would make a great read aloud for both grown-ups and kids if they were wanting to, if you had a family for caregivers and their kids and they wanted to learn together. And then Anton Troyer, who just last week had a fantastic piece in the Atlantic talking about the relationship between Native Americans and national parks. And he made the argument that national parks should be repatriated to their respective tribes. So he had a great piece in the Atlantic that I really recommend checking out. But he wrote everything you want to know about Indians, but we're afraid to ask. And it's the Young Readers Edition. And that just came out this spring. And I have my copy right here. And then the one next to it talks about treaties. So if you were interested in knowing more about treaties and you were interested in talking to kids more about treaties, whoop, I clicked there. Treaty Words is right next to it, and it just came out. So there are hundreds of treaties that the US government has made with tribes. Just as an example, in Aotearoa, New Zealand, there is one treaty that was made between the British when they colonized Aotearoa, New Zealand, and the Maori people, and that's called the Treaty of Waitangi. Just one treaty. And because of that treaty, the Maori people, through the court system, have been able to regain and reclaim a lot of rights. So for example, the Maori own half of all fishing rights in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So they've got that one treaty, and they've been able to take it through the courts and reassert and reclaim their fundamental rights. In the US, it's different because there are hundreds of treaties, many of which have never been honored and a lot of which have been broken. So I really recommend reading Treaty Words. Visiting, I can, in the resources, I'll have some links where if you want to do further reading about that, and check out Honor the Treaties. But we have these books that we can bring into our nonfiction and just our nonfiction section and make it more rich, make it more true to history and true to people's lived realities. All right, so speaking of nonfiction, what stories do you think of when you think about Native books? What stories do you have in your collection? Can you think of any in your collection? Who authored them? Are they written from an outsider's perspective, or are they written by Indigenous authors? What types of programming do you think of? What month do you think of when you think of programming? Is it November? Is it for Native American Heritage Month? Is that the month that you're thinking of? So wander through your collection. Take a look at the books that are in your nonfiction section. Take a look at the books that are in your picture books, in your chapter books. And I just want you to just kind of do a little bit of an examination of what stories are being told, what perspective is being shared, and whose stories are being told. Because we have a chance here to really have a different and more accurate representation in the books that we have in our catalog. And as far as what types of programming, I want you to think crafts too. What kind of crafts are we doing? So I'm going to talk about that more on the next page. So let's go beyond November, right? Let's go beyond Native American Heritage Month. Let's take a closer look at our collection and our crafts. Thanksgiving is the big one. It's what I see people ask a lot of questions about. And I'll give a few examples. Luckily, I have coworkers and I have people that work with me that are really comfortable asking me things. So as far as Thanksgiving, a couple of years ago, a coworker who is one of my really close friends came to me at Thanksgiving, and I think she already knew the answer because she approached me like, Mandi, we can't do a teepee craft. You wouldn't let me do a teepee craft for Thanksgiving, would you? And I said, nope, that's not a good idea. And I explained why. First of all, there's this sort of pan-Indianism that happens, right? There are all these portrayals of tribes that usually default to the Plains tribes. So we get teepees, we get that sort of aesthetic going on. So a teepee really falls into pan-Indianism. And also, what does a teepee craft have to do with Thanksgiving? Are you just trying to force that in there? So let's examine Thanksgiving and our portrayals of Thanksgiving, right? Let's take a look at the books that are in our collection in Thanksgiving. So for example, I was going through my books and Fancy Nancy Thanksgiving came across my desk. And I was flipping through it because anything with Thanksgiving in the title, I automatically read. So I'm not telling you what you can or can't have in your collection. I'm just giving you kind of some alternate perspectives and some ideas to take a look at what it has. And at one page, you know, you're going through, you have this family celebration, they're cooking together, and then out of nowhere, Fancy Nancy cuts a bunch of construction paper into feathers and makes a fake feather paper headdress that she wears. So she looks like, it's like Fancy Nancy goes to Coachella or something. She's wearing these fake feather paper headdresses. And then she runs around the house doing whooping, basically doing that stereotypical whooping. So that is not a representation that I want Native kids to see. And that is not a representation that I want non-Native kids to see, because this is not an accurate or positive portrayal. This is our stereotypical portrayal that has been happening, you know, for decades and for centuries. So I really urge you to take a look at those Thanksgiving books and see what's being portrayed in them. I had another book that I opened up in my nonfiction section, and it was about the Pilgrims. And it was going through, and it was a Pilgrim child's perspective. So it was people dressed up, and they had taken photographs to make it look like, you know, relatable, I guess, to 21st century kids. And one page, when I opened it up, said, "Not all Indians are scary." And so that was in my nonfiction section. And so I weeded that, because in our nonfiction section, right, we want things that are factual and true and accurate representations. And the line, "Not all Indians are scary," is not a factual representation to have in my nonfiction section, right? It is a harmful portrayal and a harmful representation. I can't justify that book being on the nonfiction shelves. So that one went. So take a look at the portrayals and the representations. So in your nonfiction section, what is living there? And what is it teaching non-Native kids? And what is it teaching Native kids, right? Also, I had somebody else ask me if we could do a dream catcher craft out of paper plates. And I said no, in the nicest way possible. So people can come up to me and ask me questions, and I'm just saying, no, that's not, that's cultural appropriation. And it's taking something that's sacred and it's turning it into a paper plate. So ask yourself, of your sacred beliefs, what are you okay with being appropriated and being misrepresented? And why is it okay to do that with another culture's sacred beliefs? So I'm going to go on. And Christina, if I'm talking too much and running out of time, let me know. I forgot to set my timer. I am a big talker.
Okay, no worries. There are a couple questions, but I think we'll circle back around to them.
Okay. So let's talk about partners. That was just my quick overview of nonfiction and weeding. And like I would say, also have a focus in your nonfiction section of STEM, right? And especially if you look at traditional tales that are in your nonfiction, take a look at those and look at the lessons that can be taught, because the stories contained lessons, and the stories contain lessons, and not just lessons for life, but lessons from history, science, technology, engineering, and math. So I'm going to use an example from Australia, that there have been, among the Aboriginal nations there, among the Indigenous nations in Australia, there have been stories of a great fireball from the sky that transformed the landscape. Well, scientists just found in the past few years that there was a meteorite that crashed to Earth, and the science of that and the history of that was contained in these stories that have been passed down through oral tradition for thousands of years. So there is deep scientific and historical and archaeological knowledge contained within these stories. All right, this is my really fast version. All right, partners, let's talk community partners. We're librarians, we love community partners. So here are some examples of partners that you could bring in and how you can bring them in. So Indigenous partners that you can bring in to talk. So I work with my school district's Indian education coordinator. So our Coeur d'Alene School District, we have an Indian education coordinator, and we partner. She gives me a call if she needs book recommendations to bring into the classroom. I give her a call if I would like to if I'd like to collaborate on programming. So reach out, look, does your school district have an Indian education coordinator? Who are they? I'm sure, like you, they're very busy, you're very busy, but maybe find a time you could have. You could get coffee, you could get tea, you could chat, even just via email. Yeah, coffee or tea. Wow, Mandi, post-COVID, get coffee or tea. Wow, I was thinking to when Sari and I first met. So post-COVID, safely, Zoom chat, however, whatever. Yeah. So find out who your school district's Indian education coordinator is. Find out how they would like to collaborate with you. Contact your local tribe, reach out to your local tribe, especially your local tribe's tribal language department. I'm currently working with our tribal language department to get our signage here at the library in the Coeur d'Alene language, right? Because this library exists on Coeur d'Alene land. So the language should be represented so that the people walking into this library know whose land our library is on. Guest speakers. So let's talk about guest speakers. So often, so it's important to know history, right? We need to know history, but so many portrayals of Indigenous peoples are focused on the past to the point where it almost as if Indigenous peoples are a relic of the past, right? An antiquated relic of a bygone era. So focus on the present so that Indigenous peoples are shown to not only have a present, but a future. So when you're bringing speakers in, look beyond history, look beyond trauma, right? You look to speakers on botany and gardening, art, poetry, science. So that slide I had a ways back, it showed all of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, all of the magnificent things they're doing. You can bring in speakers to go beyond, to go deeper, and outside of November, right? If you've got summer coming up and you have a gardening series, invite an Indigenous gardener in, an Indigenous botanist. All right, and I see so many questions coming and I hope I can answer them. All right, so authors to know. You know how when you're ordering and there are authors where you're like, yeah, Rick Riordan's got a new book coming out. I'm gonna get that book in. There are Indigenous authors to know. When I show you some research sources later, you're gonna see Julie Flett's name all over it. She is a fantastic author and illustrator. And so I put everybody's tribal nation in parentheses where I can. So we've got Julie Flett. These are just some authors to know that if you're going through a journal or if you see on Ingram or Baker and Taylor this author's name, just know that this is a solid, fantastic author that you should consider bringing in. So Julie Flett, Cynthia Lightish Smith, you might be familiar. She's been writing for a while. She just started a brand new imprint, and I believe it's through HarperCollins, but the imprint is called Heart Drum. And she's focusing on Indigenous authors and illustrators and creators. So take a look at Heart Drum. I have it linked on our resources slide. And you can see she has all of her winter through summer 2021 preview of all of the titles that are coming out through Heart Drum. She also edited this fantastic book that you see on the screen here that's called Ancestor Approved. It's intertribal stories for kids. Bring that in, it's fantastic. It is different authors, kids authors from a wide variety of tribes and just telling stories, and it's fantastic. Monique Graysmith, Korean Lakota, she writes really fantastic picture books and board books. Tracy Sorrell, Cherokee Nation, she's written a whole wide variety of books. Ojali Heliga. So I was talking about Thanksgiving, right? A few slides back. So the week of Thanksgiving, I usually just do a thankful story time. I don't do a Thanksgiving story time, but I love gratitude. I love gratitude. I love being thankful. So I read Ojali Heliga, We Are Grateful by Tracy Sorrell. And then I also read How Do Dinosaurs Say Thank You? And Todd Parr's The Thank You book. But and then she has another one coming out called We Are Still Here, and I'll show that on another slide. And she wrote a great book about a scientist, a biography of a scientist. And then Christine Day writes really fantastic chapter books. So if you're looking for the mid-grade juvenile fiction, Christine Day is another name you want to watch for. All right, let's talk new releases. So I want to give full credit to Stacy Wells, who posted all these titles on Twitter. I added a few in, but I like to give credit where credit's due. That's one thing I wanted to talk about, is how being Indigenous informs my work as a librarian. Is I believe in community, I believe in working in relationship and learning from one another and working together and growing together. So that's how I feel being Native informs what I do. All right, so these are some spring releases. If you needed just some book lists to quickly add to your collection, here's some great titles. Zelena Gonzalez is another author to her books are wonderful. I'm going to talk about those in just a second about how to incorporate books into story time. So Zelina Gonzalez has a new book. There's Julie Flett, you'll see her name. And so we've got all of these fantastic. So this is picture books, new picture books. And we'll be sharing these resources and we'll be sharing the slides, but feel free to screenshot anything you need to. That's usually how I operate in webinars, is I take all of the screenshots. All right. New chapter books. So you'll see again, Cynthia Lightish Smith, Sisters of the Never Sea. And then the Jojo McCoon's, that's one of those really great early chapter books for emerging readers, really engaging. Healer of the Water Monster is based on sacred, and I believe it's Navajo stories, but the author, Brian Young, worked with tribal elders to make sure that he didn't tell any stories that couldn't be shared. Because not all stories, and I know there was a question about storytelling, not all stories are for widespread consumption. They're not all stories are meant to be shared. So he made sure that these stories were ones that could be shared and could be told. All right, and then Joseph Bruchac, that's another name. That's another fantastic name that I think people are familiar with. New nonfiction book. So Sharice Davids, How a Native Kid Became a Congressman, everything you wanted to know about Indians but were too afraid to ask. So in your biographies, take a look at your biographies section, your easy and juvenile biographies. Are the only biographies you have in there of Natives, is it Pocahontas and Sacagawea? Are those the only biographies you have? Because that should not be the case, right? So we've got Potter Maria Martinez here, and then this is Tracy Sorrell's new book. It's The Secret Career of Mary Golda Ross, a Cherokee aerospace engineer. And then there's Christine Day, who I talked about a few slides ago, has a biography of Maria Tallchief, the ballerina, coming out. So there are some great portrayals you can have in your biography section, right, that aren't just limited to Pocahontas. We Are Still Here. This is Tracy Sorrell's other new book, Native American Truths Everyone Should Know. I think that goes really well with that Anton Troyer book. So that everything you wanted to know about Indians would be great for older readers, and We Are Still Here would be great for that preschool, early to mid elementary range. And then The Frog Mother is the fourth in this series. There's also been The Salmon Mother and The Grizzly Mother. And so that's a great juvenile nonfiction read. All right. So let's programming. How am I for time, Christina? Okay.
Let's see, maybe about 3 or 4 more minutes.
Okay, I can speed through.
Okay.
Programming. So let's go beyond, like I was saying, let's go beyond November. Let's incorporate these books into our everyday programming, right? We have these themes that we do, and we want kids to see themselves in books, and we want non-Native kids to see Native kids. So let's incorporate these books. So here are some titles that you could incorporate with families in love. So On the Trap Line is about a young boy and his grandfather going fishing. A Day with Yaya is another Julie Flett book about a little girl and her grandmother. Fry Bread, I love Fry Bread. Fry Bread, a Native American family story, not only talks about fry bread and families, but also the history, past, present, and future, all told through the story of food. Absolutely magnificent. Animals. Okay, so there is a bad history of American Indians being portrayed as animals in children's books, right? So as animals that are dressed up in very stereotypical clothing. That is not what I'm talking here. We want to avoid that. These are, so we've got summer reading coming up, Tales and Tales, where we'll be doing a lot of animal themed books here. So these are kids interacting with animals. So The Girl and the Wolf is a really great retelling of Little Red Riding Hood, where I love wolves, where the wolf is not the bad guy. Bow Wow Pow Wow is a fun book about a little girl and a dog. And then Johnny's Pheasant, a boy and his grandmother find a pheasant on the road, and the pheasant has a little surprise for them. Military Veterans Day at the mountain's base talks about the long history of Native Americans in military service. So this is about a family waiting for a family member, a female pilot, to come home, and gathering together and missing her and worrying about her and waiting to celebrate the day she comes home. Love, Feeling, Self-Confidence. We've got Sharice's Big Voice again. Be Your Own Best Friend, Forever, and Josie Dances, all about embracing who we are, right? And sometimes feeling our lack of self-confidence, and then coming forward into the truth of who we are. Nature and mindfulness. Every Monday, I do a story time called Mindful Monday. This morning for Earth Week, I read Stand Like a Cedar this morning in Mindful Monday. And where wonder grows, we can talk about nature, mindfulness, being one with nature, celebrating the earth and connection. Love Shapes Change Death. I love Zelena Gonzalez's All Around Us. It's about circles in nature and the circles in life. So you can use this book in a whole variety of themes. And a lot of these books can be used in a whole variety of themes where you can make these connections. Resources, we're almost done here. Okay, so I've got resources. American Indian Library Association. I'm part of the Read Native group on the American Indian Library Association. It's the first ever challenge, all native challenge. So book challenge. So just reading books by Indigenous authors. And we've got a kids version with a book bingo as well. Check out the American Indian Youth Literature Awards. So those are going to be some, if you need some great book lists pretty quickly to flesh out your connection.
Oh, I think we lost you there for a second, Mandi. Looks like she clicked on the American and Youth Literature Award link there. So hopefully she'll come back to us in just a minute. In the meantime, while we wait for Mandi to refresh, it looks like Jessica responded to a question earlier.
With that.
Oh, there she is back. Yay.
Oh no.
We lost you there for a second when you accidentally clicked out to the Youth Awards website.
Oh.
So that's where we lost you, if you want to pick up from there.
All right. Am I back? Okay. I just knew I would do something like that in front of dozens and dozens of people. This is a spreadsheet that I have created where I am putting in titles, authors, the author and illustrators, tribal nations, the ISBN of the book, just to make it easy for people to order. And then on the side here, I have the themes that you could use them in programming. So it says potential programming themes. So colors, numbers, kindness, grandparents, military families, mysteries, seasons, things like that, just to make, partly for me, but I'll share it with anybody who needs it, just to make it as easy as possible for people to not only bring these books into their collection, but to incorporate them into programming as well. And then we have some free webinars coming up. Let's see, there's Uplifting Native Voices is coming up about We Are Water Protectors. And then Tracy Sorrell in a couple days is doing a presentation. All of these are free, by the way, on We Are Still Here, Native American Truths Everyone Should Know. And then I'm really excited about this one. It's gonna be on May 25th and 26th for just a couple hours each day. It's authentic children's literature in the classroom and the library, Indigenous voices. And that, it just looks really, really cool. There's a really great poster for that I can share for that. And then Christina has been working on putting together a list of Idaho authors that you could bring in to present and talk at your library if you would like. All right, and I think, so here's my contact information and I'm gonna stop sharing there. I think I got through all that.
You sure did. I was trying to tell you, you have a few more minutes if you want to slow down, but just to clarify, I want to make sure that everyone understood that when we lost you there for a second and you started talking about the database. Could you just explain again, just to make sure people understand that you've developed it, but you're willing to share it and that sort of thing?
Yes, I'm willing to share, absolutely, totally. I've been going through and putting in contemporary Indigenous children's literature, and I have the titles, the authors and the illustrators and the translators and their respective tribal nations. I'm putting in the ISBNs, although a lot of them are available in different formats, the ISBNs, and then also the suggested age range and the potential themes, basically kind of looking through the books and pulling out what themes. So it could be love, family, animals, seasons, nature, And then, oh, I see a question just popped out. We're going to send out the resources, and the link to my spreadsheet will be on there. Yeah. And then I wanted to show really quickly, since I have a few more minutes, I wanted to show this awesome, I just really want to, okay, what am I doing? Now I need to exit my full screen. There we go. Tracy Sorrell tweeted this, and I really want to share this. Authentic children's literature in the classroom and library. These are all the speakers. A lot of these people I've talked about today. So Christine Day, Don Quigley, Debbie Reese, Tracy Sorrell, Darcy Little Badger, Aragon Starr. If you're into graphic novels, not just for kids, but graphic novels for grown-ups, for adults, Aragon Starr is a fantastic person to know. Naomi Bishop, Anton Troyer, who wrote that Everything You Wanted to Know. So I really recommend signing up for this, and I have these links that we can send out as well. And then I'll show my spreadsheet again. That's my spreadsheet. And I'll keep adding to it. It has a few dozen right now, but there are way more than that. So I'm going to keep adding to it and keep working on it. And yeah, I'll share it. It's a work in progress right now.
Great. Thank you. I know we shared a lot of information, and I just want to clarify, all of this will get emailed out to all of you, and it will also live on our website afterwards on the Info2Go webinar pages. So don't fret if you didn't get everything. And so now I'd like to go back to some of the questions, and some of these are for Mandi and some of these are for Sunshine and Jessica. Let's go back to during Mandi's talk about the Fancy Nancy books. There was a question, just to clarify. She said, Mandi, do you recommend that books like Fancy Nancy Thanksgiving be weeded out, or do you just try not to promote them? What if the patron asks for a book from Fancy Nancy that's missing from your series?
So with that one, I did weed that book. It was available in our larger consortium. Quite a few copies were available. So if patrons wanted it, so we are a city library, and we're part of a broader network where there's a few libraries that are just within a few miles of us. I did weed that one because Fancy Nancy Thanksgiving was really easily available to anyone who wanted it. But it just wasn't one that I was comfortable having on the shelf, because I found that portrayal to be a harmful portrayal, especially from a character like Fancy Nancy, who's a fantastic character that kids really try to emulate and like to dress up like. So if kids are wanting to dress up like Fancy Nancy and they see Fancy Nancy doing that, they're going to want to do that too. So, and I'm going to leave that decision is up to you. You're responsible for your own library's collection development. I'm sure people would disagree with me about reading that book, and that's your right. So you're the one who's going to be making that decision, and you're going to be balancing the portrayals that are seen in those books with the needs of your patrons who want to access this book. So in the case of this book, people still had access to the book. I was not preventing them access to this book. And then the one that said not all Indians are scary, that one went. That was a really easy decision, especially because the book was from like 2001 or something. So a nonfiction book that's 20 years old is also pretty easy to get out of there as well.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, this question is for any of you ladies. Is from Emma. Our system is in the early stages of incorporating land acknowledgements. So far, we've only used one during large-scale adult events. Do you have any advice for how to adapt an acknowledgement for all kinds of programs?
I would like to say that it would be appropriate to contact the tribal representatives in the area in which you are doing the land acknowledgement. That would be pretty classy. But I have heard land acknowledgements from presidents of universities, mayors, governors and stuff, people like that, top officials. I think that's also pretty classy. So it just really depends on who you want to get to do your land acknowledgement. But I think that that's great that you even would consider that, because I think it's important to acknowledge what land Indigenous land that you're on. So thank you for that question.
I wanted to say too, when you're creating that, after you've got you know, like help from the tribe that you're working with or the reservation, then maybe just having that available to other programs and other groups that would want to do that at their events too. So kind of how you're trying to expand that to other programming is just once you've got it finished, let them know that you've worked with so-and-so from the tribe and all these people, and that this is what you've come up with, so they can use that as an example or something that they can use at their event too, because I've seen that a lot around here. But it is kind of a bigger deal. I mean, there's like a whole committee or something, Jessica, right, that works on writing these and making sure that they're accurate. So there's a little bit of work, but once you get it done, it's amazing to see they're able to do that across your programming, and it really means a lot.
Yeah, I'll just say that we talked a bit about that for this webinar, and we ultimately, that was originally in the plan, we ultimately decided that in this case, we would do a 20-minute land acknowledgement by letting Johanna, giving her the time to really go through the history, which is, and then the map drawing activity, which was rushed, but you get the idea that like if you had to imagine the map, that if you'd stepped anywhere inside of the state of Idaho, you would have stepped on American Indian land. So that was our approach. I've heard a lot of people talk about this. I haven't heard a single answer to this question that was all the same. Like I've heard people say different things, but I really appreciate this perspectives. So let's see, anyone else want to add on to that or? Okay, let me see here. There was a question about adult fiction authors, and I know we put a couple of those ideas in the chat, and then Mandi had a slide, and like we said, we are trying to be a collector of Idaho authors from Idaho tribes. So if you know of anyone, and is going to kind of keep a running list. So far, the ones that we have, Mandi has on her spreadsheet, and most of those, if I recall, were adult authors rather than
So my spreadsheet, that one is Indigenous children's literature.
Sorry, I didn't. The PowerPoint that had Dr. Warjack.
And then there's also with Read Native, the Read Native team has put together a whole spreadsheet of adult authors. So I would really recommend checking out Read Native. And then also a plug for, there's a book club that's run through Instagram and Zoom that's called Well Read Native. And they're a great resource as well. And they meet monthly with really awesome speakers. But yeah, the Read Native webpage can get you to the adult information. Yeah.
There's another on Facebook, Indigenous Bookworms. I just joined it the other day. So it's kind of small. I think like 100 people. We start our first book here in a few days. So there's one too.
Nice. Okay, there's another question. It says, I maintain our juvenile collection, which is used by pre-service teachers in local classrooms. I get asked for books about our local Indigenous groups, and then in parentheses, Lenny, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that, Lenape, but I know there are people of various Indigenous nations living here. I usually focus on a theme. How important is it to have books from authors from local tribal nations?
I think it's extremely important to invite your local Native authors. However, there's not very many of them. You know, even in our brainstorming sessions that we've held in the past, you know, there's not too many Native authors, but there are some. And I think that it's important to invite them to your library. I know Dr. Warjack had a lot to do with, she was one of the leaders of the Alcatraz occupation in 1969. And so she gets invited a lot to California, to the libraries and museums and places like that. But she says, nobody in Idaho ever invites me anywhere. So, and she says, even though I'm from Idaho, but she's a big part of California history. So anyway, yes, very important to include our Native authors from our local tribes.
Okay, also somebody is asking, we kind of touched on this, are there any Facebook sites to join for Indigenous library services, collection development, and programming ideas? Anyone know of any?
I would just highly recommend joining the American Indian Library Association. I believe it's $20 and you do not have to be Native to join. So it is Native led and Native facilitated, but anyone is welcome to join. Yeah, and so I'd really recommend that. You'll be on the listserv, you'll get book ideas. Oh, and follow, so I know the question was about Facebook and I could just be revealing myself as a Twitter person. Native Twitter, hashtag Native Twitter is fantastic. A lot of these authors are really, Tracy Sorrell, Christine Day, they're super active on Twitter. And I just really highly recommend that. That's gonna be a really great place to follow. I keep plugging Read Native, but follow Read Native on Facebook as well.
Great, thank you. And then there was another question about asking for the other webinar links. So I put both of those in there, both the one coming up about water protectors, which is actually, I think, like, it's like Wednesday. So it's happening really, it's the 21st, Wednesday, Thursday. And then the Indigenous Voices, the 2-day event, that's not until May, but I do recommend you sign up early because I'm guessing it's going to fill up with all those star power there. So I put that link in there. And I think that was all the questions. But if I missed any, because there was a lot of activity going on. Mandi?
Oh, I just saw this one about how can you determine if a book about American Indians
Okay.
Is a valid storybook to keep. Read it. And then a great place to start is American Indians in Children's Literature. Debbie Reese has done a tremendous amount of work. And so if you go onto her website and take a look at what she says, and I would start there. Yeah, I would start with American Indians in Children's Literature. And then I would do, like we do for a lot of books, I would do your research. And so I wouldn't be, and so as a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, I love reading books about my tribe because I feel culture and language reflected back at me, and I love reading books about other tribes, but I would not be qualified to write a book that's about the perspective of, let's say, a girl growing up in the Coeur d'Alene tribe. I would have to do a tremendous amount of research, and I would have to have sensitivity readers and everything. So you want to make sure that the people, so it's not just, again, we talk about that pan-Indianism. So even as an enrolled citizen of my tribe, I don't have universal cultural competence about that. So we want to look at all levels at that and just do our research. So yeah, do your research on the book to determine, and start just with what Native authors have said about the book and Native researchers and Native reviewers have said about the book.
Okay, well, I think that's all we have prepared, but we have time if we want to hang out, if the presenters want to hang out for a few minutes, and Mandi wants to say something.
I never answered the question about storytelling.
Oh, okay.
Yes, about storytelling. So I guess I would start with the caveat, and Jessica and Sunshine, feel free to, jump in. Not all stories are meant to be shared. Not all stories are meant to be widely told. I would start with seeing if somebody from your local tribe could come in and do storytelling in your library first. That's where I would start. Start with, authentic experts in their own culture and their own stories coming in and telling the story. Then I would see if you could get permission to tell the story, and you would need to check if it's an appropriate story to tell and if you are an appropriate person to tell it. And also, do you have the cultural competence to understand what the story is trying to say?
I just wanted to add what I kind of already wrote about, was that sometimes stories are only told at certain times of the year for some tribes. I know our tribes, it's kind of a taboo if you tell a story, especially like a creation, or not a creation story, but I don't know. There's just certain stories you don't tell any other time of the year, just only during winter time. And so again, I would definitely reach out to the tribes that you're wanting to be to include in your stories. So like what Mandi had stated, check with the tribes.
Yeah, and absolutely. There are like Johanna was saying, there are tribal education coordinators in each area, but the starting spot is to reach out to the local tribe in your area, start making connections, relationships, and just putting in the effort and the time, and then it will grow from there. And so that we did include, she suggested we include all the tribal websites for the state of Idaho. So that's way back in the chat, and they're easy to find online. So looks like we have a follow-up question. If everyone wants to take a chance to look at that. Is it inappropriate to suggest Own Voices books from other tribal nations? Does anybody have a follow-up for Vitalina?
Well, I guess I would say, you know, this happens with other topics as well. Sometimes people come in looking for something and we don't necessarily, we might not have it on our shelves, or it might be checked out. And so sometimes we can say, well, we don't have this for you, but here's what I can give you now. So I think as long as you explain that you didn't have those books on your shelf currently, and then that you're making an effort towards incorporating more of those titles into your collection to the best of your abilities. But I mean, we do that. If all of my, if I have a request for books about fairies and all of our fairy books are gone, I might grab like unicorns and mermaids. We do that with assisting patrons a lot. Or if all of my construction equipment books are checked out, I might say, well, here's books on trains. We do that a lot. So while we do want to get patrons to the most accurate information possible, I think it's, you know, I'm working on getting these titles and working on fulfilling this request. In the meantime, here's a selection of other titles that might work for you, but I understand if they don't.
I think it's also important to understand what they're looking for, because like I had said, in my son's class, the whole reason that we even incorporated or introduced the book was because he was getting teased for his long hair. So the book that we chose was Thunder's Hair. And then from there, the kids were interested in the history. So we got some Native American history books. So it kind of just went after that, but just knowing what are they looking for, and is there a specific book, whether it's from that tribe or not, and explaining that it's not universal, but this, like Mandi said, could you work for what you're looking for.
Yeah, it's that reference question. It's getting to the question behind the question of what they're actually looking for. That's a great point, Sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I just really enjoyed hearing Sunshine's story about what happened to her and her experience about her son being called a girl among the other classmates. I mean, that happens to a lot of our Native students here going to school off of the reservation, more in particular. So, I mean, that happens in junior high, high school as well. So I think that being prepared and having those books or those resources available would be great to have on hand.
I feel like I'm going off now, but I just wanted to say that when these conversations come up, I feel like it brings up a lot more questions, because when I did bring that up, I had another teacher reach out, and a counselor and the Indian Ed counselor reach out and just say, we want these for our library because we had an incident where this happened and the kid came back Monday with his hair completely cut off. And so it's like all of these like spearheading, you know, a lot of more questions will come up. And so don't ever feel like you have to know the answers to all of those, because a lot of us are even trying to figure it out ourselves. So all of you 46 people that are still here, just know that this is big work, you know, and you won't always know the answers, and having these resources and places that you can turn to really will help you to find those answers for people who have questions. And that's the biggest work, is just answering those or finding the answers and resources for them. Because unless you have the conversation, no one will ever know.
It's very true. I remember my nephew had gone to that same issue, I think in middle school, and my mom showed him a picture of his great grandfather, and his great grandfather, it was, you know, he had a 6-pack stomach. He came out of one of our ceremonies from the Sundance, and he had long hair, and he was just all warriored up looking. And that made him so proud of who he was. So he just kept his long hair, and you know, had to explain to other students why he valued his hair being long, but he still has his long hair to this day, and he's 21 now.
Well, that feels like a really happy place to end this webinar. I want to say thank you so much to our presenters today. Thank you to Mandi and Sunshine and Jessica and to Johanna, who had to leave early. Thanks also to Christina for helping moderate this. This has been such an excellent webinar. Thank you all so much for attending and your wonderful, thoughtful questions and comments. I'm going to stop the recording now.